Hello and welcome to Publishing Without Supervision podcast. I am your host, Erica Conroy, and my lovely, wonderful, beautiful, and Vanna White-esque co-host here is Xavier Granville. Hello, Xavier.
Hello, I'm neither blonde, leggy, or tall, so I appreciate the Vanna White comparison. That's lovely.
Well, it's a name that I thought was, one that would be recognizable no matter what country, our
Uh,
viewers
uh,
or
uh,
listeners are in.
yeah, I would say I'm more comparable to Pat Sajak, but thanks.
I have no idea who that is.
He's the guy who says, "And here's Vanna White."
Oh, okay. See, I'm
He,
just more
yeah,
familiar with Vanna White, so
he's the other guy.
oh, he's the person that introduces Vanna White. Okay, that's important. I also assume he's the actual host, right?
Yeah, you got it.
Okay. So this is our monthly update now. So actually our fourth monthly update. You might have noticed though, just quickly, that we missed a couple of episodes over the previous month, and that was mostly because X was stolen by aliens.
Yep,
And that's why we were unable to record some episodes. But we stuck with the important ones, like the ones with Zoe. I mean, everyone wants to know about the news
absolutely.
and Zoe's
Yes.
opinion and insider information.
hmm And luckily, thanks to Zoe, the news went on without me.
Yeah, it's almost like we don't need you. I mean, no, we need you for all the other episodes, but we just need
Absolutely.
someone to kind of herd Zoe and introduce the next topic, I think. When one. Okay, so do you actually have anything to report this month? Because I know you've been super, super, super busy. I mean, how many people work more than one job, let alone two? Except for Robert, I believe he has 4 jobs.
Oh yeah. Don't even get into Robert Chaz. You want to check out his podcast? Is still all that Chaz?
I
Uh,
believe so. We'll put a link in the notes.
yes, but yeah, definitely look into Robert Chaz Shoots podcast as far as his productivity talks because he blows us out of the water as far as the stuff that he can do in the limited amount of time that he has. So yes, in the past month, I have written only sparse amounts on what projects that I've had going. And what free time that I've had between work, there really hasn't been much free time, really. But what free time that I've had, I've tried to maintain a somewhat of a social life. So, as I tried to maintain like gaming groups and stuff like that, where I'll run D&D or something like that. And oddly enough, a couple of weeks back, I think, 2 weeks back now, during the middle of the week, I had been asked to run a game, and it was a sci-fi type of game. And I had never run a sci-fi game before, but I'm a big fan of Doctor Who and all these other types of things. So coming up with it was a lot of fun. And ultimately, at the end of the day, my friends who I ran the game for, they had a lot of fun with it, but they didn't quite so much care about the adventure that I had prepared, so much as they cared about the ship that I created and the crew that was aboard it. So they liked the political aspect of having all of these already established characters on board. Usually with running D&D and stuff like that, or any kind of game, I find that there's this element of being away, and the main protagonists or the party or what have you are kind of off on their adventure, and then when the adventure's done, they come back to civilization, and then there's all these familiar faces. What I thought was very interesting about running a sci-fi game was that almost it's like town, because it's this group of 20-something NPCs that are always consistently around the main protagonists. So yeah, it gave me a lot to think on as far as that stuff goes. Because honestly, as much as the rise of this the space opera and the successful books like those of Chris Fox's and stuff like that. I honestly space opera or any of those things as anything of interest because of those already established TV shows like Firefly and Star Trek Next Generation and Battlestar and stuff like that. You know, like I kind of felt like I'd already cut my teeth on those by watching enough. But now, now that I've kind of played around with that, it's starting at least to seem like I might have something, a story that I might want to tell in that kind of mainframe. But most of all, rather than it being anything involving aliens or spaceships, going back to what I said before, I think what I enjoyed most was just that the differences of all these characters all working together on this one ship with a common purpose, but varying different backgrounds, in the same sense of how Firefly worked, where it seemed like, you know, there's all these people who have great that that definitely divide them morally and all those things, but ultimately they have this common goal, which is to kind of fine, you know, and they don't have much of a goal other than just to be free. So I'm starting to come around to the space opera thing, I guess, because of my role playing experience in it. Because of that, I ended up coming up with like a 40-page bio of all of my crew, then my the characters that my friends had come up with. So, you know, I have about 40 characters that I just immediately came up with on a whim because I had all this inspiration from that initial game. So, have I been writing prose? No, but I'm, as usual, I'm victim of the world builder's disease, putting it to practical use.
Yeah, it sounds like doing it in spoken word might, you know, show more nuance or provide you more interest, or even a better glimpse into the characters and the world than just writing something out or even just dictating it.
Yeah, and I've definitely had that experience with like the fantasy world that I've already been building. But I guess it was just kind of that revelation of, I guess I don't hate space opera, or well, I've never hated it, but in that sense of like it never felt like it was a story that I could tell, and now I'm less apprehensive of that, I guess.
So do you think because of this you'll either write it up as a D&D type game or and sell that online, or would you turn it, you know, be more inclined to turn it into a novel or a series?
I'm thinking at this point it would be more like a series. Yeah, because I'm waiting to see how the market is for some of these sci-fi related RPGs, because like they're definitely out there, and the demand is out there for D&D space related things, but it's at that point where, you know, it's mostly community driven content that's providing it. So as much as I'd love to contribute to that community, I want to make sure that it's something that can immediately be a return on profit. As much as art is not supposed to be 100% that always, I do think that as far as investment of time, I probably would be better off at least putting out some fiction, because no matter what, I find when it comes to RPGs, fiction is always going to be a backing point for it. If you look at D&D in particular, there's such a wealth of novels that if you wanted to go back and read them, you could, but you don't have to. In the same sense, with any perspective game if you're making one in the future. It's oftentimes better if there is fiction to go with it. Oftentimes it's incorporated into the books themselves, like the rule books themselves, just to make it so that way you can read the thing without getting your eyes crossed with only having scientific tables and stuff like that. You want to have.
That's also, I think, why they put in so many pictures, especially in the Dungeons and Dragons.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and you need to have those nice layouts of good pictures, and the flavor adds to it. So there are a couple. Eclipse Phase comes to mind as a really successful sci-fi role-playing game, but I'm waiting to see more as far as what the demand really is for that, because as much as I know, I read tons of other role-playing material outside of your traditional fantasy stuff. Fantasy still is king in the role-playing world. So in that sense of writing to market, if you're going to be putting out RPG material, I would stick to, or at least as far as your basic, hopefully it's going to be reaching a wide audience. It's probably more practical to stick with fantasy, while at the same time striving for doing something new.
Ah, wow. Have you heard of this new fiction genre called lit RPG?
No, I have not. Tell me more.
Well, you'll have to go back and watch our interview with Michael Chatfield just the other month. But I think you could probably do that, because it's you can use it as two worlds. So you have the gamers in the real life world who are doing their gaming things and living their lives, but also the rest of the story is set in the gaming universe, and you can have all those things. And I think a really good example of something like that is, even though it's not a space one, but it's more a D&D type one, is Drew Hayes's book series called Spells, Swords, and Stealth, because that shows while it follows in the game, it follows the NPC characters who have become main characters in their own right. It also follows a group of players. It alternates between the two, and that's how I guess you could categorize it as a lit RPG, because it does take into account those kinds of things. And I think you might want to consider that as well, because that way you can write your space story and still have it as fiction, but it's still lit RPG, and you could maybe marry the two up. Like, you could provide an actual role play guide for the universe, as well as writing the lit RPG fiction. I mean, that's just something to consider. I think the current fans probably would enjoy that, but only if they have the time to play the game, obviously. Some of them, I think, read the lit RPG books because they may not have the time, just like people watch on Twitch, streamers and D&D players. But yeah, speaking of lit RPG, since that's what I'm supposed to be writing, I guess it's my turn to update everyone on where I'm at. To be perfectly honest, I have written more for the lit RPG than I have written for the Cozy Mysteries so far. I wasn't able to meet my deadline with the editor, but he was very understanding and has pushed the deadline back, so that'll be later this month to get it to him for a beta read and then an edit, and then after I've worked on that, a final proofread. But I just wanted to bring up something that I hadn't thought about beforehand, that I've encountered while writing my lit RPG, is the game mechanics. Now, I'm not a big video gamer, which is I've gone with immersive reality for the gaming environment that I'm writing about. But something that did strike me that I probably should include was in D&D they call it exhaustion, but I think I'm going to refer to it as fatigue. I hadn't considered that. At what point would the character get exhausted or need to sleep or that kind of thing. Because I've covered like life, and Michael Chatfield recommended to me that I measure these kinds of things in percentages, so I'm not fiddling around too much with numbers and addition and subtraction. That's something that I could easily mess myself up with in the book. But he suggested percentages. And I was thinking, so I could have the life, but then there could also be the fatigue. So while the life starts at 100% and could go down and lose percentages as they get injured, throughout the day they could have a fatigue. So fatigue starts off at 0 and gets all the way up to possibly 100%. I would say at 100% they might be dead. But yeah, this could be something that would move as well. So if they have a rest, their fatigue goes back, just like if you have a rest, the little bit of injury recovery, so the life could go back up as well. But the fatigue and the life could be kind of interacting. So that's something I've also decided to incorporate into my gaming mechanics, because I thought, well, they might not be too injured, so the life could still be up near 100%, but they might be really tired. And in a fight, even though they don't get injured, they're still expending energy, so they could increase their fatigue. And in theory, could pass out, but still have enough life to, wake up again later once they've recuperated, that kind of thing. And so it's interesting what I have to think about. And every time something like that happens, I go, now, do I really have to include that? Because in gaming stats and D&D, you've got intelligence and you've got wisdom. And I thought, for my game, I've decided not to include intelligence. It's up to the player's own IQ level or own intelligence. So, yeah, but they can gain knowledge about the world, and the game will provide them with knowledge, and it's how they decide to apply it that's up to them. But if they have different varying knowledge levels, they'll get different amounts of knowledge when it's time to get knowledge from the game. So 2 players with different knowledge levels, one might find out all this stuff about a rock they're looking at, while the other person might just get told it's a rock, it's black. And the same with charisma. Instead of charisma, I have decided I would prefer it to be called personality. But at the same time, I thought, no, that's something the player is going to bring to the character as well. So if the character, the gamer, is a sourpuss, then the character will also be a sourpuss. It's all dependent on how the player plays it. So while they might have skills they can learn and spells they can acquire, and knowledge that they're given by the game, whatever they bring to the table is also at play there. But
yeah, and that's the fun thing about incorporating game mechanics, because not only, like you said, you get to kind of decide how the world works, but you get to decide how the actual mechanics of the world works, and that can be, and you can represent that in the prose by the effects of the mechanics at work, veil and show the mechanics as what they are, and depending on and that's the nice thing about games, is that there's such a wide variety out there that you can really call upon lots of different mechanics and various things like that. When you look at how Monty Cook designed his cipher system, where it's just 9 skills that are physical, social, and mental, and then you look at how designed their skills, where similar thing, where they have physical, social, and mental, but it's the combination of all of those things that result in how you make a roll. So if you're trying to fool someone, it might be a combination of and a social skill, and you take the combining, like you have +2 in diplomacy and +3 in deception. You combine those 2 together to get +5 in this lie. yeah, depending on how complicated you wanted it to be and how much you wanted the mechanics, like I said, to be represented in the world versus the effects of the mechanics, you can really get creative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like I said, I'm further along than I was in the Cozy Mystery, and but I haven't finished. So I think I'm going to go back during the second draft and add in a lot more of the mechanics. At the moment, the easiest part to write is the prose, obviously, for me. But yeah, I want to make
Yeah.
sure that the mechanics are incorporated and that they're seamless. Not just that they've been thrown in there, which is something that I've seen some reviewers, complain about and that's something that some of the authors in the community feel that, authors from other
Mhm.
genres are coming along and they're just throwing in numbers for the hell of it
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I want to.
That Dragon Ball Z thing where it's like everything's over 5,000.
Yeah, anyway. One other thing I wanted to bring up about the one I'm writing is if you're a regular follower of our podcast, you probably know that Xavier and I are fans of the Twitch stream for Critical Role, which are nerdy ass voice actors who play Dungeons and Dragons once a week. And they have a huge following, like artists, authors, people with no skills that they're able to contribute, but they like to hang out. But the fan artists, oh my god, some of their artwork is so detailed and beautiful. And I've found one. I haven't approached them yet, but I've found one that I think I will commission for the cover image for this book. I have no idea how much they're going to cost, but they do commissions, and they have several different styles. And it's a matter of me picking which style I think will create a good cover, but also a cover that accurately reflects the type of story and the tone of the story. I don't want something that's like really dark and moody and serious, because that, while there might be a little bit of that, from one or two of the characters, that's not consistent throughout the book. It doesn't represent the story. But on the other hand, I don't want anything, silly and cutesy and like 8-bit artwork or something like that, which is what I was thinking of initially. I want something, semi-realistic, but it totally looks like it's D&D, and it's a lot of the work I've seen from this artist is really good with the D&D elements, and since I'm going
That's cool.
D&D, it looks like, so fingers crossed that
Yeah.
they'll be happy to work with me.
Cool. Yeah, and that is the tough part as far as fantasy art, because it can immediately look very kiddish. I guess I don't play the game personally, but I really do. I like the style of the art for Hearthstone.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Because you could tell that they're going for a lot of those kind of more epic looking things, but at the same time, it is painted over with a very cartoonish look to it. So that I think that's like the farthest that I would go, because once you get too colorful, yeah, it can start to become almost comic book like.
Yeah, and I did see, I've like I said earlier in a previous episode, I have joined some of the Facebook groups for lit RPGs, so I have seen what some readers feel about covers and stuff, and one author shared their possible cover, and they said, what do you think? And a number of readers responded with, I think I've seen that dude on another lit RPG cover. You might want to do something else, because people might look at it and go, hang on, I think I've read that. So I thought, well, the only way for me to get really away from all of the current models that have been used is to find an artist that, isn't usually making covers. And and hoping that works, but also having that nice D&D kind of look to it. So
yeah, no, and that's it. You do have to sometimes go outside of the box. One artist that I've been following a lot lately, and she's got, I can't remember her name off right now, but I'll add it later in the doobly doo. the uh she does maps for fantasy worlds and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna have to double check as far as her process. But I'm pretty sure she uses real world reference maps as the source of her kind of brushes, because what ends up being the completed piece ends up looking more like a real world atlas rather than it was actually drawn. It looks more like Google Earth, that type of thing. And when I'm looking at some of the stuff that she's putting out, as much as I fancy myself a bit of an artist as far as drawing and stuff like that. Wow, when I see those ones, that reaffirms me that not only is there are lots of people out there who are really talented, but the technology is growing with it, and the fact that that's available out there, it tells me that that's the direction, because that's what's getting the big acclaim, right? So given that, I'm essentially just like stalking her page, waiting for a time where it looks like she's not crazy busy.
Well, speaking of stalking people and following things, I recently found in my Facebook status this guy I'd never heard before, but it turns out X is a stalkee of this person, and you might have heard of them. They're a YouTube personality. They're called Nerd Writer One, and they do a lot of breakdowns of writing and even like speeches, how people like with Louis C.K. tell a joke and what makes it effective and stuff like that. The one that passed,
they're good video essays for sure.
Yeah, video essays. But the one that caught my attention was called Passengers Rearranged, and we'll include the link in the show notes. But it's about the sci-fi romance movie that came out the second half of last year, which had Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence in it. And I really, really wanted to watch it. And I dragged my husband along to it, and he thought it was meh, beautiful, beautiful movie. But there was just something lacking. It could have been better. And anyway, Nerdwriter decided to include this in his video essay, and he basically said something that Libby Hawker has said. I don't know if she said it on our podcast earlier in the year or if it was something I read in her book about writing without pants. But it was about how if the story had been rearranged in a completely different way, but still keeping all of the content, it could be a very, very different story. It could even be genre changing. And he mapped out the 5 main structures of the movie, and just by moving a middle part to the beginning, it turned, and following a different main character from the start, it turned it from what could be a romance into a potential sci-fi thriller. And I was like, when I finished watching that, I was like, holy shit, I would watch the shit out of that sci-fi thriller. It really did change the tone and everything. There was probably some things near the end that they might wanted to change if they'd gone in that direction, but mind was blown. You know that meme?
Oh yeah. I know the one.
Yeah, but because it was a sci-fi romance, it starts off with the main male character in the movie. So later on, near the end, there's a point, a huge point, the main part of the movie where it's, the main character might die. There's a sacrifice, basically. To ruin the movie for you, spoilers, he doesn't die, but that's because in romance you can't kill off the main characters. But they really had written themselves into a corner. There was only one way they could go, and that was with him not dying. But by changing it to a sci-fi thriller, they had many more options at that point. He could die, she could somehow die. There were way more options, and even the suggestion of how the movie ended, I was all like, holy shit, I never even thought about that. But yeah, there's a lot of things that I think if you'd changed movies or even stories or even our own stories. I mean, I don't usually rearrange much in the story, but I will be in my lit RPG. I'm basically writing it in different timelines and looking at interweaving it after I've finished writing it because it's just easier for me to keep my train of thought. But yeah, it would be interesting to see, if something happens before this point, would it be different if it happened after this point? Would it change how the reader thinks and feels about a certain character because their story started first, or I started with a different character first? It's very interesting, and I recommend you watch it. The video, especially if you've seen the movie. Even if you haven't seen the movie, it's still quite interesting. I
Yeah,
think I
I
think Blair
recommend
would have
others
liked
of
it
his.
better. I think Blair would have liked it better if it was a sci-fi thriller too.
Yeah, and that reminds me too of when I was in film school, where we would have there's a couple examples I could think of that I know you can find on YouTube where all that they do is they change the backing score for the film during the preview. So it's the trailer for The Shining, but it has this bubbly, bouncy kind of family fun music. Meet Jack Torrance. He's going on a vacation with his family, and it's the way they don't change the edit of the film too much as far as from the trailer, but once that the music comes in, the tone is drastically different, and it does just feel like goofy family on vacation. Likewise, if you take a horror movie soundtrack and you put that on top of Mrs. Doubtfire, it immediately becomes very creepy, because then suddenly there's this kind of children in the attic type of thing, someone posing as someone else to get close to your children and stuff like that. It's you really can do a lot just simply by genre flipping without changing too much of the actual story, and you can see a lot of those things in just simply like Star Wars. It's a bit of a the hero's journey of the knight, going off to battle type of a thing, and it's a little bit of samurai in space. It's good to take those elements, especially when you're relying on the already established tropes. But yeah, it is the twist that often is the defining thing that one will get people interested in the first place. But often it's the thing that it makes it so that way, like you can almost get away with calling it original, even though everyone knows there's nothing original anymore.
No, nothing
but,
original.
But it's the closest thing to it, like if you can take that kind of a simple concept and turn it on its head, that really is the best way to possibly do it. My friend and I were talking about our disappointment in Doctor Who Series 9 last year, and I simply had just said, wouldn't it have been much a better story if the reason why Clara and Danny Pink and the Doctor had this kind of on and off hatred was because the Doctor knew that Danny Pink was going to die, and therefore he had gone back and was trying to save Danny Pink all along. And like that's what I mean. Like through the ability of time travel and the genre of sci-fi and fantasy, you can really start to play with what those characters' motivations and what their reactions will be. Because in the end, after Danny Pink dies, Clara decides to stay with the Doctor. But if it had been the Doctor's kind of machinations all along, that him trying to prevent Danny Pink from dying, that led to his death in the first place, well, then that's a lot of incentive for the Clara to say, hell, fuck this Doctor guy.
Yeah, but she didn't even think of that kind of thing. I mean, just wow, what if it had been suggested to her? Could you just imagine her stopping and really thinking about that?
Yeah, she could have stolen the TARDIS and it would have all been over.
Instead of getting her own TARDIS.
Yeah, it could have got It could have got really crazy, but that's just it. Like if you can think of those types of things in random other shows or books that you've seen, like, because that ultimately is it. If you want to be writing the thing that gets you excited, that you would want to see. So if they're to all those out there that were disappointed by Lost and aren't writing their own version of Lost that is better, stop complaining.
And write the damn thing.
That's what I mean.
Call it found. The plot has been found.
Oh no.
No, I do. What you said about changing the music, I'm just wondering how much would a story change, or would it just provide more atmosphere by making a movie black and white? Because I see that Logan's been re-released in the movies in some places as a black and white version.
Black and white?
Do you think, in a black and white version. Do you think it would make much difference?
It absolutely will. I used to have a television that was on the Fritz, and it would go into black and white, and so I actually eventually got used to watching certain films in black and white. And yeah, no, they automatically add a different tone to it, because, and you'll see that's why was Young Frankenstein by Mel Brooks filmed in black and white when it was. There's no reason other than aesthetics, and the aesthetic is important. So yeah, absolutely. I think that I think if you can take that, because that really is just kind of the first layer of kind of the visual of the story or what have you. It's the kind of the first layer. Whereas if you really want to make changes to the plot, that's much deeper. Yeah, no, that's a good point, because that's not necessarily a huge change, but it is.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen Logan. It was on my must-see list, but for some reason we never saw it. But from what I heard, I would imagine that the black and white version would make it even more gritty, even more bleak, and give it that kind of noir feeling towards it.
Yeah, Rocky Horror Picture Show in black and white likewise is kind of strange, because those parts that are darker do seem darker when it's like the experimental scene where Frankfurter is got all the medical apparatuses and he's bringing Rocky to life for the first time. It is a lot more of that Dr. Frankenstein frightening thing, because if you think back to just like those old films where it is in black and white, that's how usually you would iconically see the mad scientist, in black and white.
Oh, now that you've brought that up, we'll go back to Doctor Who. I a couple of years ago managed to watch most of the first episode of the very first Doctor Who, the one with Hartnell. And I could see how kids get scared of shit, because everything looked fucking creepy in that episode. I was like, how do kids even watch this? Because Doctor Who has and is and always will be a show that's meant for the children, for family. And I've got friends who are like, what the fuck? I wouldn't show my kids this. But if they saw the original episode, they'd be like, fuck, I wouldn't even show my significant other this. It's so fucking creepy,
Yeah, absolutely. And then it's even more extreme when you go to episode 2, the Daleks, because when you think as far as culturally what was going on, that was what, 15 years after World War II. So it would have 1963. So yeah, it would have been still pretty fresh in their memories as far as hearing those totalitarian squawking voices. Get down. We will destroy you. So I imagine at that time it was even more freaky, because you would have had the kids who were like too young to know what was going on, and then you would have had kind of like this PTSD coming around the corner of the living room, going like, "What the hell was that?"
And I mean, Daleks and never look scary in colour, but I could see how they would scare the shit out of kids and have them hiding behind the couches, like we always hear from old people who watched it when they were kids. But I watched that about 2 years ago, I watched one of the recently found episodes of Patrick Troughton's. And I haven't watched much Troughton, but we went and saw it in the movie theater, and it was animated, right? But it was in
cool.
black and white
Yeah.
animation to stay true to that time period. But oh my god, it was real, the real actual audio from the episode. But wow,
Yeah,
it was
because
creepy
that's
as
mostly what's
shit,
been.
man.
Yeah, I bet.
Even the
That's
doctor was scary. I mean, he was like,
cool.
because he recently regenerated, so this was him in his new form,
Mhm,
and we were kind of like,
mhm.
he's insane, he's crazy, isn't he?
Yeah,
We were just as feeling just as confused and suspicious and a little afraid of him as his companions on the screen were feeling. But
cool.
I would like to see one of the newer episodes do a black and white and see what would happen there. That I think that would be interesting.
Absolutely. And yeah, as far as those types of things go, like just the subtle tone shifts can often really define a lot of the episodes, because you know, you look at even just without leaving Doctor Who, the episodes where they just stray from a character, like, you know, usually it's pretty centric on the Doctor or the companion. The episodes where it's just the Doctor, or the episodes where it's mostly following another person,
Yeah.
like in Blink type of a thing, or in the episode of the one about the guy who's knows that he's going to die, and you're following him the whole time, and him videotaping himself. There's when they do those kind of the disconnect from the normal kind of the status quo, because you usually when it's in those things of a series, you know, you're getting used to a flow of how these characters are starting to do things. There's a, you know, with mysteries, there's a setup as much as there is with romances and stuff like that. There's all those meet cutes and stuff like that, so you get used to these certain rhythms. What's fun is if you can, in the middle of it, throw in another character and make them the center point. One of my favorite examples for this is in American Gods by Neil Gaiman. And as we followed this one character making this cross-country trip across America, meeting all of these various gods, every now and then there will be a chapter break where there will be just an individual one-off scene involving either a deity from old religion in the New World, or like a succubus living in New York, you know, and that type of a thing. It's just a one-off little short, 2-page thing. And I always remember this one of a genie, and he had kind of like was a taxi cab driver, and through this kind of, you know, clever wordplay, he ends up being the guy exiting the car, and the dude who was in the back now is the cab driver. You know, through his what was left of his wish magic and stuff like that. So and that's that kind of a thing where, you know, keep it within the world, but every now and then show that the world's bigger than just these individual people, because sometimes that's really what's going to get other people thinking, as far as, well, oh, maybe these characters really aren't all that important in the grand scheme.
Yeah, and it's also a way to keep the story a bit unpredictable. I mean, even if you are doing quite a common trope or something, one way to break it up is to toss in something that's totally, I guess it's really the only time you totally want to interrupt the flow on purpose. It's kind of like how Adele sings, you know, she kind of fluctuates in some of the tones of her notes, but in a way you're not expecting, which keeps you drawn into the song and listening more intensely.
True. Whenever I run a D&D game for my home group with the game that's based in the world that I've created, because they're they have their own story that's happening as far as their characters are going, but what's happening in the world is much bigger than what's happening to them. So at the beginning of each game, I always have a prelude where essentially I'll just talk for about 5 minutes and I'll explain a scene of something that's happening close by. It might not have anything to do with them. They might not have any kind of connection to these people, but essentially I'll just free form read aloud this a scene involving what's happening in this corner of the kingdom, because what's happening over there is connected with what's happening to the party, but it might not be. They might not know it immediately.
Yeah, something if that's happening to them indirectly, or it might be something that happens in a few more sessions later where they can go, oh,
yeah. Yeah, I always hearken it to a cold opening from a TV show, as far as you show something for 5 minutes, and then it has a bit of a cliffhanger, and then it's the opening credits. So what I always do is I'll have this kind of opening thing, and then as I'm finishing, I cue up this theme music that they know immediately. It's like, oh, the game has begun once we hear that.
Oh, you have theme music. That's awesome. But the way you said that, how you would start it with something that's indirectly related to them, but is part of the wider world, that reminds me of the other game that was on Project Alpha. You know that one, the science fiction one, where it follows two separate D&D groups, and they alternate each week between which group's doing it, but each group affects the other group's story. So what happens to one group, the ramifications might affect the next group. And I've heard about games like that before, and I find that quite fascinating. And in a way, that's could be what we're doing if we write series of books. How each when you follow different characters for different books, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I liked what Matt Coble had said in one of those the tabletop episode or table talk episodes. I can't remember which, but he said the next game that he looks forward to running is one where he's going to individually run games solo with each of his players, and over a couple sessions he's going to be introducing all of these NPCs to the individual players, but then later on you'll find out, oh, these NPCs are actually your future party. So the people that you learn along the way and develop these relationships with eventually are going to be the people that other players are going to be playing, and therefore you kind of end up together all of their backstories without them ever really being totally aware of each other.
That'll be interesting to see when they do end up getting together, if they already know stuff about the other characters, but how well they then interact with those other players, because the players themselves haven't been there. Will it be the same as how they interacted with them when they thought they were NPCs?
Yeah, absolutely. And just in that sense of just that not only is the new thief in the party, your friend, is also the person from your backstory that like, oh, it's that guy. I know him through this and this. I only talked to them the one time, but I know who he is.
Well, that'd be interesting to see. We've been talking for a very long time, so I just want to finish up by saying that my husband and I last night went to the Lower Hutt Library, which is a wee way away from us, so required a bit of driving after he went to work. But it was for an event called Murder at the Library, and it's a series of talks where the New Zealand Book Council has organised. I think there's about over 10 of them around the country, where they moderate a panel discussion with crime fiction writers from New Zealand. And last night we saw 3 such crime writers. I'm not sure what I expected, to be perfectly honest, and I'm not sure if I got what I expected or didn't expect. But they were all traditionally published, and the only person who mentioned self-publishing was the actual moderator from the book council, who said it could be lucrative and rewarding, but required a lot of work. But the traditional publishers lamented the same things that we usually hear from traditional publishers: is there's no money involved in, publishing books, and it's really hard to sell a book, and that kind of thing. I thought that was interesting. My husband kept looking at me with a knowing look, we know that's not true. But yes, they talked mostly about their books and the crime fiction, why they had created a character like that, why they had set it in the certain location, and that kind of information. They were all long-listed nominees for what's called the Nio Marsh Awards, which is an annual, I want to say award. I guess that's the right word for New Zealand crime mystery. And Nio Marsh, I think she's a dame. She wrote prolifically in a cozy mystery type series in New Zealand, like lots and lots of books. But I found it interesting that they said that last year's entrants, they only received 29 mystery books from Kiwi or Kiwi-based authors, but this year they've received over 50 nominations. So I'm wondering if maybe when I get around to doing this cozy mystery, again, if I come back to it, maybe I should be submitting my book for this award. And then I could be talking at a library. My husband seemed to think I would have a lot more to say than some of them did, and I would actually know how to use a microphone correctly. Oh my God, waving it around while they're talking. But no, it was interesting what they had to say, and I think the best line came from one author called Kat Connor, who actually writes kind of a bit gritty FBI stories that have a cyber element to them, but also have a little bit of basis set in New Zealand, which is kind of what I'm going for, except not as gritty. Her best line was when she was asked, why do you think people read crime fiction or mysteries, and she came back with, people are perverts.
Okay.
I immediately wrote that answer down. I'm like, I can use that somewhere. She was quite a character, actually.
Yeah.
I might look her up. But yeah, I'll definitely read the first book in her series. So I think the first book's called Killer Bite, with bite being BYTE. So,
oh, nice.
Yeah. But yeah, that was interesting. Yeah, but I'm interested to see if one day, if I do go mystery route, if I could make it at Murder at the Library, and but I'd be totally self-published, But yeah. What plans do you have for this month, X?
This month, next week, I am finishing up the scoring of the film that I'm working on. So that's yay. And then the week after, I'm in mixing stages, so I'll be out of town for that. And so once I'm done that, after the midway through May there, then I'm going to be back onto actual writing, which is going to be great. And I don't have any D&D games coming up other than the one I'm running this Friday, so I won't have too many distractions on my weekends. So hopefully it'll give me a chance to get more done. I'm not sure.
We'll just assume that we will D&D every fortnight, which is every 2 weeks for Americans who don't know what the word fortnight means. Like one of our players. So just think about that. Put it in your little iCal or your calendar or whatever it is. X. What will I be doing this month? I will be finishing the first draft and hopefully the second draft of my lit RPG. Yay! I will be at the D&D session that X is running on the Friday, his time. And then the following weekend, when my editor has his deadline for me, I will also be running my first ever D&D session. It'll be a lovely, wonderful one shot. I have crazy characters, crazy characters prepared for the players. My sister, who's one of the players, says she's going to kill her character, so we'll have to see if she can roll for that. But it should be interesting. And then the last week of May, my husband and I are actually taking our first holiday for quite a few years. We haven't been anywhere unless, it's been a family obligation, someone's terminally ill, or there's a funeral to go to. So we thought we'd have a nice holiday, just the two of us, go to Rotorua, sit in the hot pools, sit in the mud pool. My husband insists that he won't be in the mud pool, but I will make him get in the mud pool, and that kind of thing. So that'll be fun. And then we come back, and since I plan to have finished my first book and hopefully publish it the end of May, beginning of June, I can get my hair cut and dyed. Yay, thank God.
Hey.
So the next time you see me for a monthly update, I'm going turquoise, I think. Turquoise hair and a nice undercut, because it's watching on the video, it's crazy. There's got to be at least 2 inches of hair there. Just wrong.
Disgusting.
Okay, so thank you for listening to us or watching us. If that is the case, you can find us on our website with all of our show notes and links to various topics that we've mentioned and books and whatever on pwspodcast.com. And I think that's it. That's it from me, Erica Conroy, and from you, Xavier Granville. So what do we say to the internet?
Adios, internets. Goodbye.
See ya. Thanks.